But I do think there is an effort here by very sinister forces to spark a World War III type scenario, to embroil the United States in a broader conflict, to reshape the world order. In fact, Joe Biden himself just recently explained that he was hoping that a new world order would emerge from all this. And of course, he said he wanted America to lead it, but we know from his actions, we know from the fruit of the policies that his handlers are putting into place, that if they wanted America to actually lead this new world order, they must be the most incompetent fools on the face of the earth, right? They're doing everything possible to destroy the American economy, to destroy the American military, to destroy American prestige and credibility.
Here at Liberty and Finance, we're licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. We are standing by the inventory, ready to make sure you get what you need, even into the wee hours of night and on weekends, because preparedness doesn't stop. Call us 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always glad to have this returning guest. Alex Newman is a journalist. He's a writer. He speaks widely on topics about freedom and the truth and how it impacts families and the education of their children and every aspect of our lives. Alex, thanks for coming back again on Liberty and Finance.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Dunnigan.
Oh, I should mention we're interviewing you this Monday, March 28th, 2022. And of the questions that were submitted by viewers ahead of your arrival here, most of them revolve around free speech and the truth or the lack of truth in the press and from officialdom. You've talked with us about those concerns before, why it matters and what we can do about it individually and collectively. There's one question that comes right up front here from Ben Jones, who says, I would like to ask Alex if he thinks free speech in this country is dead and gone forever.
Well, that's a good question and a fair question. I don't think free speech is dead. I think the fascists would like it to be dead. The big tech companies in partnership with the government are doing everything possible to destroy free speech in practical terms. But we still have the ability to speak freely. And so far, sort of without government consequences. But I mean, just the fact that the government is now referring to all different sorts of speech as a possible terror threat. One of their most recent terrorism alerts said that misinformation and conspiracy theories about COVID and the injections and the election was one of the biggest terror threats that the nation was facing. Even though that isn't a definitive restriction on free speech, it certainly chills free speech in that people who otherwise would be inclined to speak out may now be too scared to do so. And of course, that's what it was calculated to do. We also have, and this has been revealed in a number of lawsuits, the government and officials within the government coordinating with the big tech companies to silence people, including candidates on election fraud issues where there's allegations of election fraud. So it's very disturbing what's happening. But with all of that said, we do still have numerous avenues available to us for free speech. We can still gather in person, at least in most of the country right now, and essentially say what we want. I think they would love to do away with that. They would love it if we would move church online so that Mark Zuckerberg can determine what can be preached in a sermon and what can't be. They would love to see something like that, but we can still meet in person, and we still have print publications that have relatively wide latitude. Now, whether that will continue or whether the government will use subversive and shady means to shut that down remains to be seen. We've seen more and more weaponization of government, not just to terrorize people and intimidate people, but also to harass people. You know, the weaponization of the IRS is famous, going after organizations and individuals that they don't like. But as far as the law goes, we still have the ability to speak freely in this country, and we must protect that. How much longer we'll have it, I don't know. But right now, the U.S. Constitution is still the supreme law of the land. The U.S. Constitution still says in the First Amendment that Congress shall make no law. And that applies to all of the federal government because only the Congress is able to make law. So according to the law, yes, we still have free speech. Obviously, it's under threat, but it's still there.
Following up on free speech is also the truthfulness or the lack thereof of the media, the press, the stories that we're being told. And this has become more and more pervasive, part of people's lives. I mean, in the old days, it was like just a newspaper, usually your town newspaper, your city newspaper, and then it was radio, and then it became television, and now it's everything constantly being surrounding us in media. And within that, there's been grave concern about, with as many serious things going on right now in the world that are truly poised to disrupt our families' financial lives, our families' freedom, our families' future, our children's development, and their view of reality, of where they fit into the world, the relationship between parents and children, etc. The role of media and the need for truth in media has perhaps never been greater. What are you seeing as the greatest current threats to the truth of what we're being told, and specific remedies do you think people can take to fix that in their own lives?
Well, we do see an all-out assault on truth from most of the media. The media is a joke at this point, and I heard somebody joke the other day, oh yeah, I watch CNN just so that I know to believe exactly the opposite of whatever they tell me. And it's almost close to reality, where almost everything we're being told is, if not an outright lie, certainly an obfuscation, a partial truth designed to mislead, designed to elicit certain emotional reactions. However, there are still a lot of valuable and truthful media outlets out there. I happen to write for a large number of them. I think your show is one of them. Now, there are obvious restrictions that come with having to use platforms that are owned by totalitarians who hate liberty, who hate truth, who hate speech. But even their stranglehold there is, I think, under threat. We've seen more and more rivals pop up. YouTube censors people, and so they move over to other platforms, and they take a big part of their audience with them. Now, that hasn't reached a critical mass yet, but they are losing a huge percentage of their market share. There's no doubt about it. In fact, if I was a shareholder in Alphabet, the company that owns YouTube, I would probably be getting ready to file a lawsuit against the members of the board there, because they have a fiduciary responsibility. They have a duty to do what's in the best interest of their shareholders. And I struggle to see how blowing up a big segment of your market share is in the best interest of shareholders, right? When you're deliberately chasing away hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of potential consumers whose eyes would have been glued to your platform watching advertisements that you're making money on. That, in my opinion, is a blatant breach of your fiduciary responsibilities. So I think as we go forward, we're going to see more and more the monopolies breaking apart. Now, I think there are some possible complicating factors. I think the idea of a cyber attack is a very real possibility, and would almost certainly be used to consolidate, I should say, to reconsolidate control over the internet. They want to make it so that you can no longer log on to the computer without verifying your identity, without confirmed track record of who you are and what you were doing and all the rest of it. And cyber attacks would make that not only feasible but likely. So there are factors that could complicate it. But I think on current trends, what we're seeing now is a new decentralization of the internet. When the internet first began, it was at least when it first began publicly and commercially, it really was a decentralized thing. You had a lot of startup companies. Nobody knew who was going to rise to the top. And then we had this period of consolidation where Google and Facebook and a handful of major companies ended up consolidating control over huge segments of the internet. But because of these developments that we've seen over the last few years, the escalating censorship, the breaking of the algorithms, the efforts to determine what you can see, what you can say, what you can read, more and more people are leaving those companies and they're moving to alternatives like Rumble, like BitChute, like Band.video, like Brighteon. And these are good platforms that I think are taking more and more market share from the big guys. So there are still a lot of places where truthful information can be acquired. And I think it drives the totalitarians absolutely crazy. It's very much like the boy who pointed out that the emperor had no clothes. As long as the truth is out there somewhere and there are large numbers of people following the truth around, there's going to continue to be this pressure to shut down every possible angle, to demonize it as a terrorist propaganda outlet. But right now, there are a lot of places where you can still get truthful information. And I encourage people who are concerned about this to really do what you can to support media outlets that are trying to tell the truth. Get yourself subscriptions to physical print magazines, even if you can't necessarily read every article, every issue. It's critical that these avenues continue. It's critical that they be financially viable. Incidentally, right now we're seeing phenomenal growth in the alternative media. The various publications that I'm associated with are all growing by leaps and bounds because there is such a hunger for truth, and there is such a realization that you're not going to find it easily, at least on Google, on YouTube, on Fascist Book. So these are encouraging things. I think by and large, people have woken up to the fact that the media is lying to them. And all of these things, in my opinion, are positive trends and bode well for the future.
Along the way, you touched on a topic that I wanted to bring out as well. And in addition to the question of freedom of speech and truthfulness in media, there's the question of privacy and tracking, and you did bring that in. We have a question for a viewer. Think for yourself. Ask, what do you recommend regular people do as a way to avoid all the tracking going on?
That's a hard one. I am not a tech expert, but I do encourage people to become tech experts. If we want to fight big tech, we have to understand technology too. We have to have people who value liberty, who value what's right, who also understand the technology, who also understand the code. I do everything I can to maintain my privacy. I use, for example, the Brave browser. Brave is a phenomenal browser. It's just, as far as I know, the most privacy-oriented browser of all. By default, it blocks a lot of the tracking. It blocks even a lot of the advertisements. So that's one thing you can use. Another thing that I do regularly is I poison the data that I give to big tech. If I have to use one of their platforms for work or to access some information, I'm always feeding them poison data. And my thinking is the algorithms and the artificial intelligence that they're developing are so advanced, but they all depend on having accurate data to be able to do what they do. So if you give 18 different middle initials, if you give 15 different birth dates, if you give 13 different cities where you allegedly live, that makes the processing for these artificial intelligence programs and algorithms that much more difficult. And it really poisons their data. It makes it far less useful. And I think everybody should be doing that. There's no reason why you should be voluntarily handing over all your private and sensitive data to these companies that disagree with you, hate you, want to silence you, are more than willing to turn you over, shut you down, destroy your livelihood. That's who we're dealing with, and we need to be honest about that, and we should not be helping them. Another thing that I do personally is I use a flip phone. Never had a smartphone, never will. There's no reason why I need to pay a large amount of money to an evil corporation to hand over all my data to said evil corporation so that they can share it all with the government and with everybody else. There's absolutely no reason for me to do that. So I try to be as conscious as possible of privacy. I don't use them myself, but I understand from some privacy experts that I know that there are even operating systems. Like if you know how to use Linux and the alternatives that are out there, there's a smartphone out there, I understand, that's being made that has got privacy built into every facet of it. I think the company is called Purism, and I think the phone is called Librem. And as I understand it, at least, it actually has a physical switch where you can shut off the power to the microphone, to the GPS tracker, locator, whatever it is, so that even if somebody's able to install malicious software onto your device, you can physically disable the electrical current, so it would make it impossible for hackers or for big government or for big tech to monitor what you're doing. And I think we should all be more and more privacy conscious. I tell people, if you're still doing your searches through Google, you're crazy, right? First of all, you're getting terrible results. They're doing everything they can to hide the truth from you and promote garbage. Second of all, they're taking all that data, they're compiling it, they're selling it, and they're weaponizing it against you. So find alternatives. I used to use DuckDuckGo. I have stopped that recently because they have come out in support of this climate change narrative. And you know what? I don't need my search engine to tell me what its opinion on scientific controversies is. I don't need my search engine to try to determine for me what is or is not Russian misinformation, right? I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions about what information I believe to be credible and not. So when they came out and did this, they claim to be privacy focused, but at this point, I have my doubts. But the Brave search engine is very good. Search.brave.com. I do occasionally use Bing's search engine because you get pretty good results. Actually, they haven't poisoned their results like Google has. However, I wouldn't trust Microsoft or the former head of Microsoft, Bill Gates, to clean a toilet bowl, much less to harvest all of my personal data and all of my search queries. So use Bing with caution, but absolutely protecting privacy is critical. I wish I could do a better job of it, but when I can't, I just make sure to poison their data.
Another thing you talked with us about in the past, and it's really come to head in the current geopolitical environment, is the divisive pressure, the divisive tactics that have been used by these powers that be that are controlling a lot of the information that we're receiving, what we're allowed to say, what we're allowed to hear, what we're allowed to think, into creating factions among us, dividing us from each other, and therefore divide and conquer. You talked about how old lines of political party divisions then got rehashed into lines for other whether it's climate or whether it's disease response or whether it's whatever, that the factions tend to be played upon as reinforcing and further dividing us. In the latest geopolitical controversy of Russia and Ukraine, that seems to be recurring. And rather than people coming together and seeing that we are America and the people of the world are related because we're all people, people are dividing up among themselves in factions again around this topic. Can you talk to us briefly about what you think is the most important thing that people don't understand, they need to understand about the Russia-Ukraine conflict? And then secondly, how we can prevent it from being yet another thing that divides us.
Excellent points there, Dunnigan. And I do think that there is a deliberate effort to keep us constantly divided, constantly at each other's throats, constantly focused on the next new shiny thing. And really, when you boil it down, most people agree on most things, right? We all want a decent world for our children to live in. We all want our streets to, at least most of us want our streets to be safe. We all want the grocery stores to be stocked with groceries. We all have a general sense that you shouldn't lie, cheat, steal, rob, murder. These are things that most decent human beings agree with, and there should be, a lot that unites us. And as Americans, there used to be a lot that united us when we had a truer understanding of our history. But all of these efforts to divide us are very deliberate. And you're right, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is once again being used as a wedge to divide Americans. In one sense, there's always going to be division when it comes to truth, right? In fact, Jesus himself talked about coming to cause division and coming with a sword. And, there's always going to be, when there's a matter of truth and error, there's always going to be division there. And I think one thing we should all be united on is a recognition that the media is and always has been, at least has been throughout my lifetime, lying to us and deceiving us. And that's the case with this as well. I actually see this whole charade that they've presented for us, where you can either line up behind Zelensky and argue that he's this heroic superhero who's defending his country heroically and all the rest, or you can line up behind Putin and believe these silly things like he's saving the world from Ukrainian Nazis and things like this. Why do we have to fall into one of those two predetermined outcomes? I think there are plenty of other reasonable positions that people can take. And this shouldn't be something that divides people. I think if we had a truthful account of what was going on, there would be much more unity. And that's part of the problem, is that there are so many lies that when people see the lies, then automatically it causes a division with people who believe the lies. And so that's problematic, and it's deliberate. But you would think that this would be something that Americans could say, well, hey, that doesn't mean we have to hate our neighbor because our neighbor wants to fly a Ukraine flag, or our neighbor doesn't want to fly a Ukraine flag. Why do we have to hate our neighbor just because we believe something about a conflict that's going on the other side of the planet? My neighbor isn't necessarily an evil monster because he's flying a Ukraine flag or because he's not flying a Ukraine flag, right? But I do think there is an effort here by very sinister forces to spark a World War III type scenario, to embroil the United States in a broader conflict, to reshape the the world order. In fact, Joe Biden himself just recently explained that he was hoping that a new world order would emerge from all this. And of course, he said he wanted America to lead it, but we know from his actions, we know from the fruit of the policies that his handlers are putting into place that if they wanted America to actually lead this new world order, they must be the most incompetent fools on the face of the earth, right? They're doing everything possible to destroy the American economy, to destroy the American military, to destroy American prestige and credibility. So I think from their actions, we can infer certain things. But, there's always going to be division on some issues to some extent because we're human beings. Each one of us has different opinions, different ways of looking at the world. But I think it's important for people to recognize that we are, again, being deliberately divided, and we shouldn't fall into that trap. We don't need to hate our neighbor just because our neighbor believes the propaganda they see on TV, or if you're one of the people who believe the propaganda they see on TV, you don't need to hate your neighbor just because they don't believe the propaganda that they see on TV. We can still love our neighbor even if they have a different opinion on Ukraine or COVID or vaccines or pick your controversial issue of the day that we're all supposed to be arguing about. It doesn't need to be a divisive issue that causes us to hate each other.
Well, I know we've got to wrap because we're coming up against a time limit, but I just wanted to give you a chance to make sure that people know how to find your work and follow you. You're in more places than I've ever seen before, which is a good thing, I think. So where are some places that they can find you?
Well, thank you, Dunnigan. My personal website is libertysentinel.org. I'm the senior editor at the New American Magazine, so for people who aren't yet subscribed, I encourage you to go get a subscription to the print magazine, and you can also sign up for free to the daily headlines. You get each weekday, you'll get the top 5 or 6 headlines of what's going on in the world without the propaganda of the establishment media. I contribute to a lot of different publications, the Epoch Times, the Law Enforcement Intelligence Brief. I contribute columns to the Illinois Family Institute, and many others. When I have time, I have an article coming out in Salvo Magazine here very soon. So those are some of the things I do. I have a daily TV show every weekday, 4:30 to 5 on Frank Speech, Lindell TV. That's then later some of them rebroadcast on Brighteon TV, and they pop up on other outlets and networks as well. So that's some of the things I do. But my home base for me is libertysentinel.org and then thenewamerican.com. If you're not regularly following the content that's coming out of there, I can't encourage it highly enough. And hey, I'm a regular guest here with you, Dunnigan. I really appreciate all the valuable work that you do to keep your viewers informed on economics and so many other key issues. So thank you very much.
Very much glad to have you here, Alex. And now you know, everybody, why when I introduce Alex, I don't go through all of his credentials because he can do it a lot faster than I can. So thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for joining us and for fighting the good fight for truth and for the American family and for, I guess, just peace through real liberty and freedom for all people. And we'll continue to have you back here and always welcome our viewers' questions that are submitted ahead of your arrival so that we can learn together. And grateful for your presence here on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks so much, Dunnigan.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.